Okay. Good morning, people. So today we are starting with the new chapter called Excretory System. Which was the last one we finished? I forgot. Photosynthesis. Okay. Again, this chapter will entail quite a lot of things that you would already know of. Because most of the basic structures that I assume that you are completely aware of. So it will include the introduction to excretory organs, including other body parts, like for example, skin to some extent, which is also one of the excretory organ. Then parts of this urinary system, which is the major part of this chapter. Structure and function of kidneys and all of these will ultimately come. The mechanism of the excretion, like what exactly happens in terms of process with the nephron structure, and what are those terms that are being used. That is the whole part of this chapter. So the part that has been removed from this chapter is the artificial kidney, right? Or what is that? Dialysis. That part has been removed from the chapter. But again, we will still go over it in brief because that is like kind of a real life scenario. We'll get to know a bit about it, but that is not included in this as such. So again, I must make a disclaimer at the start itself that I am not completely prepared for the last chapter. So wherever I have finished preparing, we'll stop there for today. So excretory system, the name itself is coming from the X means out, crete means flow. So it is like flowing out, and that's where that excrete word, that's what that excrete word means. So the kind of definition, if you want to look at of the excretion, the process of removal of chemical waste, and it is mainly of the nitrogenous waste from the body, that is called as excretion. Now, before even I talk further about this, can someone tell me a difference between a secretion and excretion? What is a secretion and what is excretion?
Secretion doesn't have to be anything like what do you call waste. Secretion is not waste, like secretion of hormones. But excretion is basically removing all the unwanted waste.
Yeah. Any other difference apart from what Tanisha said? I hope you were able to hear that. Yati, what do you think? Yati, are you there? Pratyush. Okay, this is strange. Anyone else? Aryan, would you like to say what is the difference between?
I think I agree with what Tanisha said. Secretion need not be waste, and excretion is like probably specifically for waste.
But then, is there any other? So, like if we look at the definition, or rather the breaking of the word, you can see that here itself, right? Excretion is usually external, that is out, right? And secretion is mainly internal, right? So though we can also call it as a sweat secretion. Sweat is being removed out of the body, right? But that is a wrong terminology in general. So its excretion is usually outside the body, and secretion, these are usually internal or within the body. So that's like at large, that is the difference. So whatever is the process of removal of this chemical waste, and like I said, mainly nitrogenous. Now again, if we can If someone can say about why it is mainly nitrogenous, that will also be good. Anyone? Why do you think it is mainly nitrogenous waste that we talk of? And I'm sure you had learned these processes in class 9 last year for sure. That's where you would know why it is nitrogenous waste and not non-nitrogenous. Akshay? Mr. Akshay? Okay. Why people are hesitant to respond? Deeta, what do you think?
Sir, I don't even remember that. So,
Okay. Akshay?
Yeah, sir. I was speaking and gone. So I was nitrogenous metabolites, proteins, whatever are in excess, which we take, are removed as nitrogenous substances.
And what happens to the non-nitrogenous waste? Why it is not excreted, or why it is excreted in very less amount?
Sir, I remember a bit from last year. Nitrogenous, these things have to be taken regularly, but the other salts can dissolve in blood. Something I don't remember well.
Okay. Anyone would like to add to this? Kabir? Kabir is also not listening. Yes, Kabir. I can't hear you if you are trying to speak. Okay, so let me say it. I guess that's faster and better. So in terms of nitrogenous waste, we already know that most of the building blocks of our cells, they are proteins, which contains lot of nitrogen. And the other molecules, like for example, carbohydrate and fats, these are carbon based, right? Proteins are also carbon and nitrogen based, but mainly carbohydrate and fats, they are carbon and oxygen based. There is very less or almost no oxygen. So in these cases, let's say, even if we take example of glucose, it's always broken down. Carbon dioxide is generated. So, and carbon dioxide is getting exhaled through the like lungs. So in such cases, whatever is the breakdown product of carbon and oxygen related compound, that is already being taken care of to the smaller components, right? But in case of nitrogen containing compounds, they are broken down to their final component, which is called as urea, right? Which is converted into urea like compound. And that is why we need that excretion, or we need that removal of nitrogen containing compound in the form of urea from the body. And that is where it is mainly nitrogenous, because rest all the other compounds or biochemicals, they are being broken down and they can be reutilized within the body itself. Like I gave you an example of the glucose itself. So that way, and nitrogenous compounds, even if they are broken down to the smaller extent, they very few of them, like to small extent, they can be reutilized, but most of it has to be excreted out of the body when it is in excess. So that's why it talks of mainly nitrogenous compound removal from the body as a chemical waste. Excretory system also plays very important role in maintaining homeostasis. Again, I have a question here. What is homeostasis? Can anyone explain it? Have you heard of this terminology, homeostasis of the body? Neeraj? Okay. Anyone? Quickly, rather than me taking names. Okay. So homeostasis refers to the balance of the body. So you had learned of osmosis within the cell, right? Whether it was a plant cell or whatsoever, but you had learned of the process of osmosis in the root absorption and so on, right? So there we were speaking of the tonicity of the cell. So within the human body, all the different cells, they are in isotonic situation with each other, or at least they try to maintain that balance of the nutrients or whatever biomolecules with the water. And that particular stage of balance is called as homeostasis. Simplest example that I can give here is, let's say whenever you have a lot of diarrhea like situation, or whenever someone undergoes extensive vomiting, what a doctor simply does is they put a saline solution or a drip, what we call as IV drip, right? That has been plugged to whosoever that patient is, right? That is just to retain the natural balance of the body, but by providing external isotonic solution. Why we use that saline solution, that's also an interesting fact. Like it is always 0.9 normal sodium chloride solution. Again, I assume you would have learned normality and molarity in chemistry, no? Class 10? Oh, but you have learned mole concept and stuff, molecular weight, normal. Okay, so that is like 0.9 gram per liter of sodium chloride. That is what is injected, and of course it's sterile, that is isotonic with the blood situation or the intracellular situation of the fluid, and that is why it is injected. So that is to maintain the homeostasis of the body, so that body has enough water, enough nutrients or enough salt content, so that the throughout the body the homeostasis is maintained. So excretory system plays a very important role in homeostasis, and you know now how, like if we are dehydrated, we need external like supply of the saline, or we need to drink lot of water. But in case like vomiting, again, even if you drink water, it will be thrown out of the body immediately, right? So in those situations, the only like solution that is left out is to give IV drip, like if at all the vomiting is too extensive and so on. So, but in case of excretory system, whenever there is excess of body fluid, it is usually eliminated over the time, and that is when if you drink more water, more you urinate more, or if you drink less water, you tend to urinate less. That's just the normal concept of homeostasis. So the organs which are concerned with the formation, storage, elimination of urine. So formation means formation of urine, storage of urine, that is like bladder, and elimination of urine, that is urethra. All of these, they will comprise within the excretory system. This again, you know it very well. Now, when we talk of excretion, we mainly think of urine as excretion product. But there are other chemical substances which are regularly formed within our body, and they are absorbed through the food, and they need to be eliminated as well. For example, carbon dioxide, right, which is metabolite of the different anabolic as well as catabolic processes within the body. Nitrogenous metabolite, these are the breakdown products of the proteinous compound. Excess salts and vitamins, whatever is synthesized or whatever you are eating through the food, that excess has to be removed. Excess of water has to be removed. Bile pigments, whatever is secreted within the bile tube for the digestion purpose, again that is broken down in the liver, and that is being secreted in the urine, because all of these are soluble compounds. Remember, all the insoluble compounds, they will go out of the body by the process of defecation, right? That is through the feces. But all those which are soluble compounds, including your metabolites, they will go via the process of urination, right? They will go out of the body via the process of urination. So that is the major difference. Now, urea is poisonous if it is allowed to accumulate in the blood to a certain level. Right. So we know that urea is one of the nitrogenous compound that is formed after the breakdown of the protein, or what we commonly call as urochrome. So there is one interesting fact that we will learn after this, but that part is actually that product is actually the urea at the end, and if it is accumulated to the larger extent, it becomes poisonous, and that situation is called as uremia. Uremia means accumulation of urine within blood. So again, UREMIA. So wherever that at the end there is MIA, that is related to the blood, right? That situation is related to blood. It's also like, what is that terminology? Uremia, uric, I forgot. Glucosemia, no. Something is related to the glucose as well. Now it doesn't come to my mind. But yeah, there is something for sure with respect to the other compounds as well. So that is urea it being poisonous, it needs to be removed. And same is the case with your drugs as in, again, not the drugs which are used for psychological or excitation purpose, but the medicine that we take off, they are also soluble to quite some extent, and they are also broken down, and they are also removed through urine. So that is the general information so far in terms of what excretory system does. Now, when I spoke of how is the urea being created, right? So there are bile pigments in the gastrointestinal system that we know of, right? Bile pigments, which are part of the bile juice, has one of the pigment called bilirubin. Again, I would assume that you know of this word bilirubin, which is one of the bile pigment, and it like these bile pigments, including bilirubin, not bilirubin, they are breakdown products of the hemoglobin. Now you know where hemoglobin is present, which is the part of RBCs. So when the RBCs, they undergo wear and tear, that means they are dead and they have to be discarded by the body. So they are broken down into components which will have hemoglobin, and when hemoglobin is further broken down, it will produce bile pigments, which is kind of yellowish in color. And this, all of this happens in the liver cells, right? And these liver cells extract it from the circulation. Like the RBCs, they are extracted from the circulation. They are processed within the liver. They will produce the bilirubin-like compounds or bile pigment, and they will be secreted into the bile juice, which is ultimately poured into the gastrointestinal tract, specifically duodenum, which is just below the stomach, through the bile duct. So that is the whole of this, like where this urine gets its color so far in terms of bilirubin. So these pigments, they are modified in the intestine to the pigments that also gives color to the feces, which is yellowish brown color. So why the stool or the fecal matter within the body is yellowish in color is because of these bile pigments or because of the bilirubin, which are yellowish in content. And of course, depending on what you eat at the end, the color might vary in terms of yellow like shades. So that is the result of this bilirubin or bile pigment. And some of these pigments which are in excess, they are excreted in urine, and that is where again the urine sometimes gets yellow color as well. So again, I'm assuming that you would have observed sometimes urine is quite transparent, sometimes urine is quite yellowish. This depends on how much of this bilirubin or how much of these breakdown products which are yellow in pigment, they are present within the urine. So looking at all of this, you can define the excretion as removal of all the harmful and unwanted substances from the body, especially the nitrogenous waste. So that is the final definition of the excretion. Any questions so far? Rest of the things that you would know very well because it's just factual details here. Okay, so I assume there are no questions. So the human excretory system, it includes different organs that you know, a pair of kidneys, a pair of ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra. So you'll see one by one all of the structure. But before that, we need to look at all the excretory organs in general. So like I mentioned, skin being one of them, kidneys, of course, we know, and lung is also one of the excretory organ. But like we have a common understanding of, we consider urinary system as the major excretory organ or excretory system. So kidneys, these are the primary excretion organ. That means most amount of excretion happens through the kidneys, like because they remove urea in the form of urine. Sweat glands, the primary purpose of these sweat glands to be present on the skin layer is to cool down the body, right? That process is called a thermoregulation. Again, this is kind of related different activities within the body. So that is thermoregulation process. And the sweat will also carry small amount of nitrogenous waste. And that nitrogenous waste is usually again in the form of urea or so, right? Also salts that you commonly know, like generally people say that sweat is salty. That is true because small amount of salt is also being in this through these sweat glands. So that is the sweat gland as second excretory organ, and third one being the lung, and that is the exhalation of carbon dioxide from the lung process. So these are the three different excretory organs within the body, but we will be majorly emphasizing on the urinary system, that is including the kidney. Again, location wise, I assume you would know where the kidneys are located. So let me go here first. So kidneys, they are being shaped, again you would know this, located on either side of the backbone and are protected by the ribs and the muscles of the back. So if you touch at the lower back on the sides, right, on the dorsal side of your body, that's where your kidneys are located. In this diagram, it is shown like this is the liver that you can see on the right side. This is the right kidney, so obviously this is the right liver or only liver that we have on the right side. And because of this, it occupies a certain space. So usually it is being said that right kidney is little lower than the left kidney. And the reason why right kidney is lower is because on the right side there is liver present, which is a huge organ as compared to kidneys. You can also see the relative size of the liver, which is like triangular shape, and kidneys, they are just small ones. So that way liver occupies a lot of space on the right side, and that is when the kidney, right kidney is slightly lower than the left one. So that is the general consensus. Also, with respect to, now you can see this is the chest portion, right? This curve part here is the chest portion. This is this, somewhere here would be your abdominal diaphragm. Diaphragm is that part which separates the lung from the abdominal cavity. So that would be present somewhere across the kidney, and kidneys are located on the back side, like I said. And here on this part where the cursor is, that's where probably the ribs would be located at. There are like different ribs. So the last few ribs, especially the last two ribs, which are kind of hanging ribs, these are located at this position where the cursor is. I don't know how to explain that point, but it is like side of the what you say, your abdominal area, right, which is just below your rib, and you can probably touch it and feel it on your own body. Yes, Akshay.
Sir, but isn't the diaphragm above the what, liver?
Not above the liver.
Sir,
It's
the
liver
diaphragm
is
are,
kind of at the diaphragm level, kind of. So if I can find that diagram, not this one, I wanted to show this later. So diaphragm and liver. Images. See again, but this diagram is kind of faulty, I would say. See, this is kind of diaphragm that is shown here, right? But ideally, the diaphragm is somewhere here, right? At where again I'm pointing it out. I don't know if I can get the real diagram. It's like I said, it's between the thoracic cavity, like between the lungs and the abdominal cavity. That's where it is. And again, a little bit of it is with the liver part, and your kidneys are below this, what we say, liver portion. Yeah. Is that fine, Akshay?
Yeah, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Okay, so that was the first point in terms of location and in terms of how they are present. And like I said, right kidney is slightly lower than the left one. Now, how will you remember which one is lower and which one is higher? It's obviously liver is on right side. That if you remember, liver occupies more space, so obviously right kidney should be lower. Dimension wise, it is 10 to 12 centimeter in terms of length, which is like hardly small in terms of size. Width is 5 to 7 centimeter, and each kidney weighs around 150 grams approximately, right? That is like half pav kg, right? So that's the approximate weight of the kidneys. Again, this also varies from person to person. How much water do they drink, how much blood content, how much urea deposition, and all of those factors. So that way, these are the dimensions of the kidney. Structure wise, again, they have inner concave structure, so they are like kind of concave. The blood vessels, the ureter, and the nerves, they enter the kidney through a point which is called as hilum. Now, hilum is again, if you remember, is kind of connection point. So again, the kidney shape is kind of fancy here, but you can just simply imagine the bean-shaped structure. So the point where these blood vessels, this red one would be the arteries, blue one will be the veins, and this other brownish coffee color tube is the ureter, right? So all of these or all of these tubes which are entering the kidney, this particular junction is called as hilum. Even in this case, you can see it here that this would be the hilum, and both sides they will have individual hilum structures. So, which is a notch at the inner concave surface of the kidney. Again, if you have actually observed that rajma beans or kidney beans, there they have a kind of hilum, actual hilum from the plant structure, right? When the seeds they are separating from the ovary, they have certain placenta like arrangement which is connecting the ovule to ovary. So that was the hilum junction. Something similar happens here. So this ureter is kind of, and the blood vessels, they are entering out, entering in, or you can say they are coming out of the hilum portion. Then if we go into the detailed structure of this kidney, which talks of renal pelvis. Now, renal pelvis is a large funnel-shaped space. Again, you will have to remember all of these names. You will have to remember the structural arrangement, especially of the kidney section. So, renal pelvis is a large funnel-shaped space present inner to the hilum. So, again, so this part. So you can see here the artery and vein, they are entering and exiting. You can say artery would be entering and vein would be exiting. So that way, there will be this area. So again, I'm not sure how much you are aware of it, but we will come back to renal pelvis. So, but let me brief it as well. So these portions that you see here, like a stripe-like structure, that is cortex and medulla. cortex is, I have been saying cortex is always the outermost portion close to the outermost layer. That is cortex. So in this case, cortex is this region, and within the medulla, which is the innermost portion to the cortex, there will be striated muscles or striated tissue like structure. These are part of your nephrons, which you know are the smallest unit of the kidneys. Now within this cortex and medulla, they will filter out the urine, and it will come here, and that area where the urine is being stored temporarily, as soon as it is filtered out, that area is called as renal pelvis. So like I said, urine will be filtered, so the blood will come from these blood vessels to the nephrons. From nephrons it will be squeezed out, whatever is not required will come out in the renal pelvis, and from there it will go out through the ureter structure. So that internal structure of the kidneys, where it looks like large funnel shape because it's kind of collecting from all the nephron, and it is present inside or inner portion to the hilum, and has many projection, and individually they are called as calyces, or the singular is calyx. So renal calyx or calyces. So that is the structure. So let me show you that as well. You can see it here. These individual triangular portion which are emerging, it's like kind of branching, right? And again, if you can imagine the whole of this structure in 3 dimension, which is shown in this bottommost diagram, I have deliberately put different diagrams because like in terms of imagination, again we only imagine it in 2 dimension, and that's when the problem comes, right? But if you look at this lowermost central diagram, you can see it's a 3-dimensional structure, and each of this triangular shape that is shown here as medulla, it's kind of conical cup, right? And the point of that conical cup, which looks triangular in 2 dimension, will be towards the center of the kidney, and that big circular portion will be on the edges of the kidney, that is on the next to the cortex. So that is how the arrangement of calyx and pelvis is. I hope I am making it clear to you all. If you have any questions, please do ask. So we spoke of renal pelvis, hilum, and the calyx so far. So now the urine that is produced in the kidney constantly flows through the ureter and is collected in the urinary bladder. Like I said, pelvis is not the storage, it's like a temporary storage. As soon as it is filtered, it will come into the pelvis area. As it has accumulated in the pelvis, it will come down, it will flow down through the ureter, and it will be stored in the urinary bladder. So like even if you are sitting or sleeping or doing whatsoever, the urine is continuously getting filled into the bladder. It doesn't stay in the kidneys for a long time. So that is the structure of the like hilum, renal pelvis, and the calyx structure. Now, if we look further into the structure of the kidneys, so the urine that is intermittently emptied from the urinary bladder to outside of the body through the structure called urethra. This we already know, and it is specifically said as intermittently emptied. Why? Because we don't like, even though the urine is getting filled in the bladder, we don't urinate every now and then, right? It is from time to time, whenever the bladder, or we feel when the bladder is filled, we go and urinate, right? So that is intermittent emptying of this bladder. The opening of these ureters, so ureters are these tubes which connect from the kidneys to the bladder. So these are the 2 ureter, of course the left and right one. So these ureters, or at the opening of these ureters into the bladder, they are projecting inward. That means they are not usually what happens is, let me see if the diagram says the same. Exactly, this is completely faulty picture. What it means is, these ureters, they will extend a little bit inside the bladder. It does not end at the edge of the bladder. So that's when I say this diagram is a little faulty. But representation wise, this is okay. But when you actually look at the structure of the ureter, that tube of ureter will be extending inward inside the bladder to a small extent. And that's what also acts like a wall. Wall is something that will prevent the backflow of urine when the bladder contracts. So again, I will go back to this diagram. So what happens when we want to urinate? This urinary bladder portion is kind of squeezed. So the signal is passed to the brain. Brain will send certain neurotransmitter, something like adrenaline and cholinergic responses. It will contract the urinary bladder and it will push the urine through the urethra. Now, at the same time, what happens is there is a chance that urine can go back into the ureters, but that does not happen because the ureters, sphincters. So the ureters, they have a wall-like structure at the inward projection of the ureter within the bladder. So that is the main function, and these are usually the circular muscles, sphincters, what we call as sphincters, which is literally a ring-like structure, and these are like muscle made up of muscle cells. They guard the opening of the bladder into the urethra as well. So like obviously there will be two wall or two sphincter like structure, one at the opening of the ureter and the other one at the entry of the urinary bladder into urethra. So it relaxes only at the time of urination, and this process of urination has a scientific name called as micturition, right? So micturition is nothing but the process of urination, right? Or in common language, what you say is like pee or going to pee. That is the process of urination, and that is in scientific term it is called as micturition. So that micturition is dependent on the opening and closing of the sphincter, which is present at the opening of the bladder into the urethra, that is at the lowermost portion. And what we spoke of the walls, these are at the end of the ureters. So these are the two different things, but both of them, they can act like a gate. So there will be one at the right ureter, there will be the other one at the left ureter, and there will be one more sphincter which is present at the urethra position. This is like in case of male, it is at the base of the penis. That's where the urethra starts. And in case of female, it is again a separate opening coming from the ureters, like especially from the kidney. So that way, these urethra structures, they are different in male and female, and that of course you know. But the sphincters, they do the function of not allowing the backflow of the urine either into the kidney or even into the bladder. Now again coming back to that longitudinal section. Longitudinal is vertical section of the kidney. It will show two main regions, what is known as outer dark cortex and the inner lighter medulla. Now this also has a very specific thing, why it is called as dark and why it is called as lighter, right? So again, this diagram is showing exactly opposite, but this portion, so ideally when we say cortex, it is dark. So in this case, the medulla is being shown dark, but what happens is this cortex region, it is rich with the nephron structure, right? When it is rich with the nephron structure, nephrons, they have lot of blood vessels. So the moment they have lot of blood vessels, they are going to be dark color, right? That is of the red blood color. And that is when the cortex is much more darker than the medulla, because medulla contains most of the small portion of the nephron. right? And that is when that nephron structure is like very little, and that also contains filtered blood, which is nothing but the something, that fluid that is going to become urine. So that will not be red color, and that is when the medulla is light in color and the cortex is much darker in color. I hope you are able to get the difference between why the cortex has to be dark in contrary to the diagram being shown, and the medulla has to be lighter. It's a simpler logic. Cortex has lot of nephrons, and that is where it filters the blood, and then it comes to the medulla portion, which is like about to become urine, and that urine is light in color. So obviously the dark and light color are because of the presence of nephron and the presence of pre-urinary liquid, we can say. So that way the cortex and medulla, they are different. So the medulla is composed of finely striped tissues arranged in several conical pyramids, like I spoke of this earlier. So this medulla portion individually, this is like one conical shape, and because this is 2 dimension, if you imagine it in 3 dimension, it's like how in a bouquet the flowers are arranged in 3 dimension, right? So that's like a conical shape of the flower. So something similar is present here also. So there are these striped muscular regions or tissues which are present in the medulla region, and they contain several conical pyramids, right? Now at the apex of each pyramid, what is called as papilla, or pyramid or medullary papillae, it is also called as, because it is present within the medulla, and it is the papilla. Papilla again is a common word which is used for the tip or the apex. Apex means the front portion or the tip of something. So the tip of the pyramid, which is papilla like structure. So again, if I go back and show it to you in diagram, these ones, pointy ends of each of this triangular portion, ideally a pyramid, here it looks triangular in 2 dimension. These pointy ends, they will be called as papillae or medullary papillae. This whole thing is the medulla, right? The pointy ends of these medullary pyramids is called as medullary papillae. The apex of each pyramid, that is the papillae or papilla singular, will project into the pelvis of the kidney. So from there, the urine or the liquid which is about to go into the ureter, that is projected into the pelvis. So that is the structure of the medullary pyramid. And like, of course, this fact you would know of, kidneys, they are composed of many tubules, what we call simply as nephrons, and they have different names: uriniferous tubule, renal tubules, and kidney tubules. All of these, what it means is ultimately nephron. And nephrons, these are like structural as well as the functional unit of the kidneys. So that way, this is the basic description of the kidney. I guess that's it from my side for today. If you have any questions so far, you can ask. Otherwise, we'll continue with the structure of the section of the kidney in the next class. Anyone has any question to ask?
What's the capacity of the bladder?
It's usually, I guess it's 1.2 or 1.5 liter, approximately. And it also depends on distended and non-distended, means like kind of stretched and non-stretched. A regular capacity is almost 1.2. I am assuming, I may not be factually correct, but somewhere around that.
So,
Yes.
so those tubules, right? Like the last line. So there were various names. So are those the same thing, or like
They are the same thing.
okay.